The Association of American Medical Colleges is pleased to welcome you to today's Optimal Strategies for Your Residency Application with a focus on family medicine webinar for advisors and applicants. We are recording and we will make the archive available afterwards. We will email you when it is posted. We have muted all participant audio. If you need help, please send us a message. The presentation includes time for Q&A. You may submit a question at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. To access the resources, including the slides, please click on the Handouts tab where you logged in today. We will also post a link in the chat box. It is now my pleasure to welcome Richard Peng.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everybody to the webinar on optimal strategies for your residency application with a focus on family medicine. This is generally geared towards applicants and students and advisors, and this is the first in a series of 5 webinars that we'll be hosting in the next few months. So overall, the goal of this is to create a space for more specialty-specific content, and of course hear directly from program director and advisors for their insights on best practices for you this season. This is the first year that we're launching this series, so in the pursuit of improvement, we'd love to hear your feedback, and you can always share that at the end in the post-webinar survey. So starting with some housekeeping here, I'll go ahead and level set by sharing some strategy updates and data highlights from this prior season. From there, we'll go ahead and share the perspective from the student affairs advisors from our first guest speaker, Dr. Alice Mills. And then we'll follow that with the program director perspective with Dr. Stephen Brown after that. And then following these presentations to set the stage, we'll go ahead and dive into some prepared questions and if time permits, some live questions too as well. So just a bit of housekeeping here. There's many of you, a few of us. So thank you for your patience as we will do our best to address as many questions as we can. So starting with who we are at IRIS. IRIS is actually a part of the Association of American Medical Colleges. This is kind of a surprising fact sometimes for people, but really people usually see IRIS as a transactional step, but we're really part of a lot of different initiatives at the AAMC, whether it has to do with advocacy, data, diversity, other constituent affairs, and even the services that you use to get through the physician workforce in your career, build your career. IRIS is really part of that flexible and support tool in the transition to residency. I also want to address some hot topics for this upcoming season. The first one is around alleviating costs for applicants and students. You may have seen our announcement earlier this year, but there's 2 pieces that are coming into this season. The first is the introduction of the fee assistance program into IRIS. So for the first time for eligible applicants, those students may benefit from a 60% discount off of the first 50 applications. Additionally, we are also restructuring the pricing structure for the fee applications. Rather than having multiple tiers, it's going to be summarized as what you see here, those 2 tiers, the first 30 being $11 each, and then beyond that, $30 per application. This was a culmination of 2 years of research and collaboration with the community as well as financial aid experts, and we're hoping to see sizable discounts for applicants into this coming into the season. The other next hot topic that I wanted to cover that you may have heard in the past 3 years from your peers is program signals. So what are program signals? Program signals are a tool that was introduced and pioneered by a few specialties a few years back. The AAMC and IRIS has since adopted it and facilitated it for multiple specialties for the past few years. For applicants, this allows applicants to have the opportunity to express interest in a residency program beyond application at the time of application. On the other hand, program signals are intended to be used by programs as one of multiple data points that they may use to review and to decide whom to invite to interview. This is just kind of a general breakdown of different models that we've seen in the past season that you might see in this coming season as well, more generally. For some specialties, they may have adopted a small signal approach, meaning they have few signals, 5 to 7. Some specialties will adopt a large signal approach where they may have up to 25 and 30 signals at a time. And then you may see even some specialties with a two-tier signal, which is kind of an amalgamation of the two, where you combine the small model and the large model and have two sets of signals that you can distribute among your programs. And so as you can see here, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. We have other webinars that dive much deeper into the program signals, research, and things of that nature. But as you can see, there are multiple kind of pros and cons to each of these approaches. And that's why for this coming season, you'll see different specialties with different models and numbers. For today's webinar, we're focused on family medicine. As you can see, as it's highlighted here, this year it will be a set of 5 signals that you'll be able to use applying to family medicine programs. There's 23 total specialties, and while there might be differences in strategy based on your background, based on the specialties and their models, based on the programs you apply to, the one kind of guiding principle should be that you're signaling your most interested programs. The national guidance is to signal regardless of your home or away rotation, but you'll want to make sure you do your due diligence for any specialty-specific guidance, such as emergency medicine. So let's go ahead and move to some lessons learned and data from the prior season, starting with just some overall survey feedback. For applicants that responded in family medicine, 88% of those agreed that program signals reflected their true preferences at the time of application. Remember, you have to send these signals at the time of application. 74% of FM applicants agreed that these signals helped them be noticed by programs where they had the most interest. Another data point for geographic preferences saw that 87% of those FM applicants agreed that geographic preferences, again, reflected their true preferences at the time of application. With regards to data that we saw in the past, this is just kind of a quick view of how we took how our research team looked at the sample size. We looked at around 77% of the total of all FM programs at 567 programs. And this figure shows the median percentage of applicants across those sampled programs. It shows the invited to interview based on their signal status and geographic preference. The highlighted middle number is the median predicted probability, and the dotted lines represent the 10th percentile and the 90th percentile of predicted probabilities across the programs. These are very important to note because they represent the variation in the use of program signals. And this wide variation makes sense given that programs are still kind of determining sometimes how they are incorporating signals into their review process. And of course, there may be other factors that play a role in their selection decision. Generally, as you can see here, though, if there is high alignment in terms of program signals and geographic preference, this yielded the highest invitation probabilities, whereas you might have lower kind of yield for invitation probability for those who did not have preference, who did not have alignment in program signals and geographic preference. Furthermore, when we take a look at family medicine preliminary data, this is a breakdown by applicant type for MDs on the left, DOs in the middle, and then IMGs on the right. Overall, the takeaway from this slide should be that the signaling improved everyone's chances of interview, regardless of the applicant type. But again, the preliminary data here is showing that the signaling boost may be stronger for MDs and DOs than for other applicant types. A couple caveats when viewing these data, that this information or some of the data that we've posted on our area stats page, I'll share a link with later on, is that these results do not control for any other application data, such as board exam scores. And additionally, these are preliminary results from the end of the year last year. And so it's important to take those into consideration as it may not tell the full story for each of these different individual applicant cases. Moving on to more operational pieces, this is for those of you who are more experienced. You may have seen our resources, our web pages already launched, showing all the upcoming changes. I'm not going to go through every single one here. In fact, I've included the IRIS worksheet for this upcoming season in the resources and handouts. So if you have questions there, I highly recommend you taking a look at that sheet to see what's available. But just to highlight a few things, if you've experienced application before, you'll see changes in the higher education institution, honors awards, medical education interruptions board certifications. Most of it is about standardizing and restructuring the collection of data. Moving on to the applicant experience for those of you who are joining. Many of you may have heard a collaboration with Thalamus. The expectation here coming into the season is you may see an increase in programs that will use Thalamus as their primary scheduling tool. Lots of benefits here. They're able to accommodate different interview types and models. They have their own web and mobile apps that you can utilize to schedule anywhere at any time, which really improves your access as students. And additionally, they also have some benefits in terms of integration with the AAMC and ARIS, as well as specialty-specific criteria as well. Another resource that I want to highlight is the Residency Explorer that's coming in this season again. This is a tool, for those of you who don't know, that allows applicants and students to kind of explore and choose residency programs. You're able to kind of identify your competitiveness, your fit, and of course, career and personal needs. There's a lot of new data for this year. We're excited to announce that you'll have more interview data in there, new data on program signals and geographic alignment, as well as a personalized profile comparison tool. But we'll definitely share more information as we get closer to launch date for this in August. As I mentioned before, this webinar series is part of a 5-webinar series. These are the other webinars. Keep an eye out for our communications and webpage updates to register for these when they come up. And last but not least, for ARIS resources, I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to see more stats and preliminary data, you can use the QR code on the right. And then our Insights newsletter is a great place to kind of capture any sort of changes in upcoming webinars for this coming season. I do also want to make a plug for our team at the AAMC for Careers in Medicine. Not only do they have many resources for students applying to residency, and they also have resources for career advisors supporting this process. And as you can see here, they have multiple tools for creating your application list, ranking programs, developing your application. They have a lot of these resources on their webpage. A couple things to call out here. The application list has new and updated material with concrete guidance. The articles under the research programs also has been updated to include more preliminary and transitional year information. And last but not least, if you're interested in specialty-specific guidance, you can go to the ARIS directory page directly from here using the application process link. And of course, these are a couple save the dates. I'm just going to pause here. If you have any questions, you can reach the Careers in Medicine team by using the QR code on the right. There's those 2 events that you can definitely attend if you're attending those meetings, excuse me. So with that resolves my portion for today's webinar. I'm going to actually go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker for today, Dr. Alice Mills. She's the Director of Career Development in the Office of Student Affairs and Professor Educator in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. In 2017, under her leadership, the University of Cincinnati won the AAMC Careers in Medicine Excellence in Medical Student Career Advising Program Award. And she's also served as the chair of the AAMC Careers in Medicine Advisory Committee from 2019 to 2023. So I'll go ahead and turn over to Alice, Dr. Mills.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm honored to be here with the wonderful AAMC team and Dr. Brown. So before starting your application, in my experience, it's helpful to take the following steps. First, update your curriculum vitae, or sometimes called a CV. I think it's helpful when asking for letters of recommendation because your letter writers will often say, can you please send me a copy of your CV? So if you have it all ready and updated and ready to go, that's helpful. Updating your CV is also helpful for planning and completing your residency application. My students who had their CV updated had a smoother time when it came time to fill in the ARIS application. The second thing I recommend is reflecting on your passions. So what have been themes of your past experiences? And here you can use your CV as a guide. I also recommend thinking about, why are you interested in family medicine? What gets you excited about going to your family medicine rotations? And looking ahead, how do you envision your future career in family medicine? Family medicine is a wonderful specialty with so many different career paths. So consider, what might be areas of interest for you. After you've had time to self-reflect on your passions, then organize your thoughts. And there's no one right way to do this. For example, you could highlight themes on your CV, take out those different colored yellow, pink, and green highlighters and highlight common themes, or you could create a table or draw out a map. So lots of different ways to organize your thoughts. Next, when preparing your ARIS application, I suggest starting by downloading two really key resources. The first is the 2025 ARIS applicant worksheet. So the applicant worksheet is a PDF that includes all the sections that will be in the ARIS application. Since the ARIS application hasn't opened yet, this gives you a chance to preview what information you'll need in order to fill out your application. The second resource is created by the American Academy of Family Physicians, the AFP. It's called Strolling Through the Match. And this guide is updated annually. The 2024-25 version has already been posted. And it goes all the way through medical school, actually. It's starting with, when you're starting medical school and you think you might be interested in family medicine, what types of activities might you want to become involved with? And then later on, how to choose a specialty, and finally, how to apply and match in family medicine. So I definitely recommend downloading that guide. Next, it's important to just take some time to prioritize your experiences. And here's some general guidelines. If you have specific questions, certainly talk with your advisor. But some general guidelines, I suggest my students look at more recent experiences perhaps that occurred in medical school, but there may also be some significant experiences prior to medical school that would be good to include. In addition, looking for more longitudinal experiences, those that show commitment or leadership, those related to your specialty. And lastly, thinking about experiences you would be excited to talk about on an interview. I think your enthusiasm will really come through when you are talking about activities that you're passionate about. Last, select your 10 experiences. Draft a tentative list of 10 experiences. There's also a place on ARIS to know which 3 of the 10 are most meaningful, and you'll have an opportunity to write a little blurb about that. So when you're drafting your list, note which 3 of the 10 are most meaningful, and then discuss your list with an advisor, mentor, or faculty member. On to developing your program list. So I tell my students, think about which factors are most important to you. Each student is different and unique. A great starting point is to utilize the AAMC Careers in Medicine Residency Preference Exercise. It's a self-assessment that you can do that has a list of factors to consider. After you've done some self-reflection, search databases to gather basic information. So there are general databases like Residency Explorer, AMA FRIDA, Texas STAR. Then specialty-specific databases for family medicine, that would be the American Academy of Family Physicians, AFP, has a residency directory. After you've gathered this general information, you'll want to take a deeper dive. Look at individual program websites, especially for the program's mission and values. Then look at match trends for your school at different family medicine programs, and talk with any alumni from your school that might be at that program. And then draft a tentative program list and get input from others. Next. So here I've put together some examples of factors to consider when putting together your program list. By no means is this an exhaustive list. Some general factors, I think most applicants start with geography and the community. They also look at mission, values, and culture of the program, patient population, curriculum. One note about curriculum is that, programs will have certain requirements that they need to meet in order to have accreditation, but there may be some variations in terms of like the amount of elective time. Other factors to consider are the faculty and residents. Are they doing things that you are also excited about? What does resident life or wellness look like? What are the clinical sites? What about logistics, things like call schedule? And then fellowships at the same location and alumni career paths. A few family medicine specific things that you might want to consider. Some programs have special family medicine tracks like rural medicine or global health. They might have didactics, special clinic sites. Other programs may have areas of concentration, which aren't necessarily as longitudinal as those tracks, but they may have additional didactics or electives, for example, in integrative medicine, sports medicine, HIV care. Then maternity care. So, of course, all programs will have OB training, but some programs may have a higher amount of OB training and a higher volume of patients. Same thing with procedural training. All programs will have procedural training, but they might have a higher level or broader scope of procedural training. And then elective options, things like global health. Does the program have a partnership with a different clinic in a different country? So these are just some factors to consider. Next. So preparing for your interview, the first thing I tell my students is please review the application that you submitted. Know your application backwards and forwards. The interviewer can ask about anything that's in your application. Second, you'll want to utilize some great interviewing resources from the AAMC Careers in Medicine website. The AAMC also has some virtual interviewing guides, and the AFP has a residency interview guide as well. Then you'll want to review the program's website to help you learn about the program and help you with these questions. On your interview, you might be asked, why are you interested in our specific residency program? You might also be asked, what questions do you have for me? Some of my students have said that, a large part of their interview was actually, what questions do you have for me? So come with several questions. I think it's also okay to ask, different people the same question and see what they say. As you prepare for each interview, also look up information about the particular city and community. And then practice, practice, practice. By practice, I don't mean to memorize what you're going to say, because that wouldn't come off very well. Instead, just think ahead in terms of what are the key things you would want to share with the interviewer when they ask you, tell me about yourself, or why did you choose family medicine? Next. In addition to applicants, I know we have some advisors on this call, so I wanted to share some tips specifically for advisors. So the first one is to download and post the 2025 ARIS applicant worksheet for your students, and also the AFP Strolling Through the Match Guide. I think both are very useful. The second is to create a Practice My ARIS account for yourself when the 2025 season opens. So it's not available yet, but when the season opens, I like to create an account for myself where I can see what the student sees. So then when a student asks me a question, I can pull it up and I know exactly what the student is asking, and I find that's helpful. The third suggestion is to organize a class meeting about residency applications and interviews. At our school, we found that can be a lot of information and overwhelming for students, so we've split it up into 2 class meetings. We have a meeting in early June about residency applications, and then another meeting at the end of August about interviewing. Last, you might consider sending a monthly newsletter to students with just-in-time information. This is actually a suggestion from a student about 6 years ago. So we created a newsletter called Monthly Match Tips, and we send it out to our students with deadlines, updates, next steps. A bonus is that I share this newsletter with our specialty advisors so that the specialty advisors know what's happening and we're all on the same page. Next page. Next slide. Here, I just wanted to compile some helpful family medicine resources for you, and the ARIS team kindly added hyperlinks. So there's the AFP Strolling Through the Match Guide, AFP Residency Directory. There's a national conference for family medicine residents and students. I think Dr. Brown will mention interview questions. And then the NRMP has lots of data. So the link here is actually to the NRMP reports page, and then you can scroll and find different surveys. And within those surveys, you can look at family medicine. So I hope this has been helpful. I'll turn it back to Richard.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Mills. So just to address a few questions here about these resources, we have these in the handout section of the registration link. If you go to the chat and click on Eric's link for the content handouts and go to the contents tab, you should be able to find these resources posted there, along with these a PDF version of these slides, which includes these hyperlinked links as well. So thank you, Dr. Mills. Let me go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Stephen Brown. He is a program director and professor at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, the Phoenix Family Medicine Residency. He is a past president of the Association of Family Medicine Residency Directors and the 2021 winner of the ACGME's Parker J. Palmer Courage to Teach Award. He also, in his spare time, co-hosts the award-winning American Family Physician podcast with residents. Dr. Brown?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Dr. Mills. I think you stole most of the things that I have on my slides also, but it'll be great to just highlight these from a program director perspective. So Dr. Mills did a really nice job of laying out what I think is especially important for family medicine. In family medicine, we're not looking for cookie cutter applicants. We're looking for individuals who have a particular idea about how they can make an impact in their community as a family physician. So just like she said, what's your past, what's your present, what's your future? Who are you? This is the most important thing to bring to your application to family medicine. Then next, Dr. Mills also talked about this, but why did you choose family medicine? What is special about family medicine that aligns best with your hopes and dreams? Why is family medicine your choice? How can you make a difference in the world through your career choice in family medicine? And I think Dr. Mills's approach to mapping those out is a really helpful approach. And I think family medicine, maybe more than any other specialty, really appreciates people who understand what the specialty is. I think it can sometimes be a little bit misunderstood. So understanding the special role that a family medicine doctor plays in the community is really important when you apply to family medicine. Next. So then you have your, who am I? You have why you chose family medicine. And so now as you pick your programs, you're going to think, what aligns with my personal mission and my hopes and dreams? And this is not only in helping you choose what program to apply to. Am I interested in rural future practice? Am I interested in working with the urban underserved? Caution here is that after reading a few mission statements from programs, they really start to look the same. But the patient population is extremely important. Who are the types of residents that are at that program? Those are the things that will help you figure out your personal mission and your hopes and dreams. Okay, next. So maybe different from other specialties, family medicine is really the residents that match in family medicine are really split between, if you look at the orange line, the gray line, and then the maroon and the green line, entering family medicine residents are pretty much a third, MD, DO, and international medical graduates, combining both US citizen international medical graduates and foreign international medical graduates. So it really is the specialty that has the most inclusion from different types of applications. Now, this does not include SOAP. And of note, almost a third of family medicine residencies use the SOAP process to fill in the last match season. Next. This is similar to what Dr. Mills presented. These are the most important factors in how students decide where to apply. And I won't, read this, but I'll just emphasize that support during residency is extremely important to your success in residency. And so with over 700 family medicine residencies, I think I would really think very seriously about where would I have the most support to support me on my journey through residency. And then we've already mentioned the alignment of program strengths with career interests. And this is going to be especially important if you have like a niche goal. Like, I really want to be able to deliver babies when I graduate. Then you're going to really want to look for programs that have strong maternity care experiences. And you can even ask about those types of things, because even though family medicine, we all have the same program requirements, there might be more variation in family medicine residencies than there are in many other type of specialties. We have 6 months of electives built into our 3 years, which can really be tailored to your individual interests. So if you have a strong individual interest, then you'll want to align that with mentors or programs that can help you pursue your individual passion. Next. I'm here to offer a program director perspective. And I would say these are sort of the order of the ways that we decide who to offer interviews to. And the number one thing, which every program director and academic affairs expert and everybody will say, is it's a true holistic review. And this might be more important in family medicine than others. We're looking for that alignment of who you are into the missions of our program. So the experience is the chance, along with your personal statement, this is your chance to tell us who you are and how you fit with our program. So both the experiences and the personal statement. And so I think of the impactful experience section as how far you've come, overcoming barriers. And also, we might mention this later, but if you don't have a particular huge barrier that you've overcome in your career, it's fine to leave this section blank. The data from last year was about half the students used something in this section. It's totally fine to not put anything in the impactful experience section. Use your personal statement to supplement this. We really value humanistic characteristics. So if you have service, leadership, those are the things that are going to be valued by family medicine program directors. Next slide. Other really important things, we love commitment to family medicine. Like I said, not everybody understands family medicine really well and what it is. So if you've been involved in family medicine early in your medical school experience, I would definitely highlight that. Talk about, ties to the area that you're applying to can be highlighted. Interest in the program, including program signals. We will use clinical excellence from the things mentioned here, but notice this is a little deprioritized in family medicine. We're not going to put a lot of stock into research like many specialties will, except that if it's something that shows a particular passion to serving the community. And then finally, very few programs will have USMLE or COMLEX cutoffs. We mainly are looking for pass. And then we also have many applicants that have not passed the first time. And so family medicine program directors will look at a broad scope of scores. And then language is really important too. If you speak a language that serves the community that you're interested in applying to, that's going to mean a lot to the programs. Next. Re-emphasizing how valuable this conference is. You get to learn about family medicine, you get to hear about incredible things that family doctors are doing, and you get to meet hundreds of programs in the most overwhelming exhibit hall you have ever seen. So please prioritize this on your calendar if it's possible for you. Next. So family medicine application process. This is based on the format that has been suggested by the Organization of Program Director Associations. This is not finalized, but it's close to what I expect for the family medicine application season. The platforms you can see there, the deadlines, there will be no specific deadline for family medicine programs, but like everybody will recommend, you should have your application in immediately. There, like I already said, there will be some program-specific exam scores, and then family medicine has no standardized letter of evaluation. There's no SLO. My personal advice is that you should have 3 letters, and at least one should be from a family physician who knows you well clinically. It's fine to have letters from other specialties, but you should have at least one family medicine letter. And we don't prioritize in family medicine how prominent the stature is of the person who wrote your letter. Next. There's no required supplemental information. There's no standardized requirement for away rotations in family medicine. There's no standard around communications before or after interviews, love notes, those kinds of things. There's no standard around second looks. There's no standard around the interview invitation process. Like there's no universal release date. Usually interviews will be between mid-October to late January. And there's also no agreement in the family medicine community about what type of interviews we are doing. So there will be some programs that have in-person interviews. There will be some programs that have virtual only interviews, and there'll be some programs offering both. And so I would look to the program websites that should offer this information. Next. All right, we're going to turn it back over to Richard. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And thank you all for submitting those questions in the Q&A. I know we'll get to them, and I'll try to kind of combine some of the more commonly asked questions into our prepared questions. So this is our first prepared question. This question goes, what do I put into the experiences section, and what can I put into the hobbies section? Especially for the applicants who really want to express their interest in the field of family medicine and not other specialties that are maybe co-applied with. Are there any type of experiences that can really highlight that? I'll go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Mills first, if that's okay with you.
Sure. That's a great question. I think if you look at the AIRS applicant worksheet in the experiences section, there's a drop-down menu for experience type, and it lists all the different types of experiences, work, research, volunteer, et cetera. So I think looking at that will tell you kind of the different categories. I would say experiences versus hobbies tend to be more significant, more longitudinal, often more structured. The great news is that, this year in the My AIRS application, there's a dedicated hobbies and interests section. Definitely recommend putting your hobbies and interests there. The hobbies tend to be a little bit less formal, often less structured.
Yeah, the experiences are much more building the portfolio that we've talked about already. The hobbies I would think of as being a little more like, hey, this is something that I think might be fun to talk about during the interview. We're probably not going to select candidates based on whether you raise plants or love to homestead, or whether you're a cat person or a dog person. But it might be something to talk about in the interview. I would use the hobbies with caution, and the experiences are really what is going to build your application to tell us who you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question here. What kind of topics are applicants typically exploring the other impactful experiences essay? I think both of you may have touched on it in your presentations, but any other insights that you want to share here? And I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Mills again.
Yeah, great question. So just want to reiterate, what Dr. Brown said about this section being truly optional. I know that when I was a medical student and I saw the open text box, I felt pressure to fill that text box. So I want to take that pressure away from my students. And I remind them that based on the AIRS data, only about half of students completed this box. The second thing is, if a student decides to include an impactful experience, I advise them to describe the experience, but then maybe also add one sentence about why that was impactful. What did they learn from the experience? How did they grow? How might that affect the type of physician that they want to be? A couple of examples that I've seen in my students are being a first-generation college graduate and how they navigated that. Another example, being a caregiver of their grandparent while they were a medical student. Dr. Brown?
Yeah, I completely agree. You should leave this blank if you're undecided about whether you have overcome a huge barrier. I think it's totally fine to leave this blank. Loss of family members is something that commonly really impacts people's journey, challenges along their, medical education journey, first generation, coming from a traditionally disadvantaged background, especially in the context of structural racism in the United States. I think those are all things that you could include there.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. This one has to do with program signals. And this is kind of a twofer. How do you use program signals as part of your review process? And how do you advise applicants applying to family medicine with regards to program signals? I'll leave this to you, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, we could do an entire hour just on program signals. So I'll try to be brief. And the short answer to this question is programs are going to use signals very differently. Some programs get 3 signals and some programs get 400 signals. So for very strong applicants, I recommend truly using your preferences for your 5 signals. But the fact that there's only 5 means that we fully expect to offer interviews to a lot of people who don't signal us. Applicants that maybe are not as strong might want to use their signals a little more strategically, aligning them maybe with some, very competitive programs, but maybe also with some programs that are, I don't know, little safer bets for their application experience.
Agree. I guess taking a step back, I think it's important when applicants create their program list to have a range of programs. I tell my students, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's fine to have a few reach programs that would be a stretch for you, but you want to have most of your programs in that range where, you're fairly competitive and have a chance, at getting an interview. And it can also be good to have a few more safety type programs. Similarly, when it comes to program signals, in specialties with a small number of signals like family medicine and pediatrics, I recommend that most of your signals be used for programs that you're interested in and are fairly competitive for. Determining your competitiveness, of course, is the tricky issue. I suggest looking at databases like Residency Explorer, and I've heard that some exciting updates are coming in August with Residency Explorer. And of course, talking with an advisor, a faculty member, or a mentor.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. And just to kind of plug that piece about the Residency Explorer too as well, it's one of the more source verified resources for that kind of data. One thing to even take into consideration that might add to the complexity is if you're applying to other specialties, just keep in mind that this signal data may vary based on transitions that they've made and the types of models and types of numbers that they're implementing for this upcoming season. So definitely check out our website to make sure you know exactly what's coming up for the season. Let's go ahead and move on for this next question here. This is around geographic preferences. How do you use all the geographic information, the permanent address, medical school location preferences when reviewing an application? I'll go ahead and direct this one to you, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, it was pretty hilarious when last year people could put up to 5 hometowns. And I was like, what does a hometown mean anymore? So I think I'm very interested in people with ties to my region. I think the people who know the area are more likely to match there, people with family. So I will look at all of those pieces of information. And then I think also the geographic preferences can be useful here. I answered this in the chat earlier with the caveat that if you don't have a preference, that's fine, if that's your genuine preference. If you are choosing 3 geographic locations that do not include the program that you're applying to, then we will know that as program directors. And so I do think, as I mentioned earlier, in family medicine, the ties to the area are pretty important.
Awesome, thank you. And I know there were a few questions about how they might show preference to locations when they don't necessarily have connections to the area. Would this be kind of one way to do that if it's not another present application?
Yeah, I mean, geographic preferences are useful for that. Another caution, if there's a state, so there's a state in my region, so Idaho is in the same region as Arizona. They're not particularly similar. Don't write in that section about how great Idaho is, because if I'm in Arizona, then I see you writing about how great Idaho is. And that's really tipping your hand that even though it's in my same geographic region, I'm not Idaho.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Go ahead and move on to the next question here. What advice do you give applicants who are seeking to move from one geographic region to another? I'll go ahead and start with you, Dr. Mills.
Good question. I think it's pretty similar to the previous question, really. In the application, I think geographic preferences and the program signaling, helps programs to know that you have a genuine interest and or willingness, right, to move. And the text box for geographic preferences is a chance to share why you want to move. The most common reasons being, as Dr. Brown mentioned, having family in the area, having gone to school there, or having worked there. Yeah, so I think aspects of the application are really helpful for them.
I think we really understand that people are not going to always stay in the same geographic region. So I don't think this is a huge barrier, especially if you have a good reason to moving to another area.
So thank you. All right, a few more questions, and I think we're going to hit the live questions soon. And I know that there's similar questions that we're addressing, so there's some twofers here already. This one goes, what are the key points for applicants to consider when preparing to interview with programs? Do you mind taking a stab at this, Dr. Brown?
Yeah, I thought Dr. Mills outlined this very well earlier. Just know who you are, know the program, know the region. Don't ask a question that is obviously answered on the website. I think knowing information about the program before you go there, if you don't have time to research the individual nature of that program, it's probably not a good idea to even be interviewing there. You should really know the program as much as possible ahead of time. Know your application really well. When I had applied to medical school, I had taken a Greek mythology class in college because it was required. And one of my interviewers asked me about my favorite Greek myth. And I was like, are you kidding me? But certainly on your ARIS, you should know every detail about everything that you've put on there and what your most meaningful experiences are. And definitely have a few questions in your pocket, like Dr. Mills said, about, do you have any questions for me at the end of the interview?
So I would echo everything Dr. Brown said. Agree, reading the program website's key. You don't necessarily want to ask something that's right on their front page, about, schedules or things like that. And also consider, who you ask the question to. There may be different questions for the program director versus the residents, right? Program director, you may ask about, changes that are coming to the curriculum or vision, things like that. To the residents, it may be more questions about resident life and how the residents interact with each other and how they interact with faculty. So that comes into play as well. Just thinking, who you want to direct certain questions to.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to actually take a moment here to take a stab at share one of the live questions that's related to interviews. This one's related to post-interview communications. If I can direct this to Dr. Brown. Is there any information on how the commitment letters worked in the last application cycle? So for example, someone emails after an email and says, I'm committing to going to here if accepted, I'll rank your program number 1. Any kind of insights on those kinds of practices?
There's absolutely no standardization within family medicine. I think it's a very personal decision. I think it's very nice to write a note after an interview to thank them. It's not necessary. There will be some programs that tell you they will not accept them or they're not interested in them. I think you can write to a few of your top programs at the end to say how interested you are. I would not expect any kind of response. I would not use what a program director says in a letter to change your rank list in any way. So I think this is a very broad spectrum of what you can do, the sort of love note follow-ups. Nothing is expected.
Dr. Mills, any insight here?
I tell my students, if a specialty or a program says no post-interview communications, please follow their instructions. It shows how to follow instructions. And then it really does vary, as Dr. Brown said, whether to send something or not. I encourage students to wait until they've completed their interviews because, if you send something in the middle of interview season, then the very last interview that you do, you're like, wow, I love that program. It changed my mind. And that's happened to some of my students. Their very last interview was surprisingly a great fit for them. So I encourage people to wait.
Awesome, thank you. And just to kind of add on to the following instructions piece, just in speaking to programs, sometimes one piece I've heard is like, don't spam the programs. If you have documents or applications or you want to reach out to them, stuff like that. spamming them is something that is not necessarily the most optimal strategy. So just kind of keep that in mind. There's another live question that is kind of along the same vein of interviews. This topic, though, regarding couples matching. Do either of you have any tips for couples matching? And if you would recommend reaching out to programs that your program's going to interview at, but you do not? And I'll leave this up to you two. Who would like to take this first? Dr. Mills?
I have
Oh,
very
yes,
short,
Dr. Brown.
very short answer to this one. Yes, reach out to programs in the area if your partner has received an interview and you have not.
And I would just say, if you're going to be couples matching, you're going to want to increase the number of programs you apply to. You're going to want to increase the number of interviews that you do. For my couples, I asked them to set aside more time during interview season to interview than if they were individually interviewing. So making sure, you have enough months off for that. And then we do encourage them, if one partner has an interview somewhere, to contact the other partner's program. I'll let them know.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question here. Do you recommend program-specific personal statements or a statement that goes to all programs? I know this is a fairly frequently asked question. Do you mind taking this one, Dr. Mills?
No, sounds good. So in general, I recommend having one personal statement that goes to all programs. However, I have had students apply to some residency programs that in their instructions state, please address X, Y, or Z in your personal statement. So I recommend students, again, look at the program website, see if they have a specific question that they want you to address. If they do, then, you can take your original personal statement and add a paragraph, maybe near the end that addresses those specific questions or weaves it in. You probably don't need to rewrite completely your personal statement. But again, you want to look at what the program's asking for and address whatever question they may have.
Since program signals have been initiated, I think the personalized personal statement is less useful. If you use a signal, you've already told the program that you're very interested in the program. If you write a personalized note that does not align with your program signal, then that comes off as a little bit disingenuous. So I would use these with caution and extreme caution. I have received personalized personal statements for the wrong program sent to me. So be very careful with that.
Great points. I'm going to take a pause here to address a few questions I've seen up above and even now. Regarding the AAFP National Conference and Residency Fair, I know that both of you are citing resources and obviously the conference itself. Two questions. One is, for those who may not have the resources or the means to attend that, do you have any recommendations there? And then when they do make it, are there any sort of recommendations you have for approaching those particular meetings?
Yeah, so unfortunately the scholarship window has closed for those. There are many scholarships available. And then, room with multiple people, the registration is very cheap. So it's mainly like transportation. And then my advice is to experience the talks about family medicine. There's many talks about how to apply, how to use signals, great things about family medicine, maternity care, all the special areas of family medicine. And then in the exhibit hall, where there are hundreds of programs, I would think about quality rather than quantity. Target some areas that you really have questions about, get to know the residents. Don't try to zip around to as many programs as possible. And don't like send your CV out like a rainstorm of CVs falling all over the place. Quality is more important than quantity.
I was just going to add two things. One, this is really helpful, for fourth-year students to look at different programs. But I've also had a few students during the summer after their M1 year, between M1 and M2, attend this conference because they thought they were interested in family medicine, wanted to learn more, or wanted to confirm their interest. And that was very helpful just for them to attend, between their first and second year of med school. For those who can't attend, I think program websites, especially during COVID, they added a lot to their websites, not just text, but videos, interviews with residents. I think those are really helpful. Sometimes programs will also host, sort of a virtual open house or a coffee hour type of thing. So look at the program website to see if they have any upcoming events.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go and move on to the next question. And I know we're at the 5-minute mark here, so I just want to go ahead and say thank you all for submitting the questions, and thank you for your patience as we're kind of crunching through them. This one goes, I would like to know more about how pass-fail has affected, what is needed to be considered competitive. Also, what are the general views on research and influence it has on the applicants, Dr. Brown? I think you covered these talking points in your presentation already. But is there anything to add in terms of how programs view like the exams themselves, Complex USA and the USMLE, in comparison with each other?
Yeah, most programs will not care about a score. They'll look at a pass. And if you don't have a pass on your first time, you might want to explain that. Also, most programs do not distinguish between the USMLE and the COMLEX. Both are fine. And then I think I emphasized before that research is kind of downplayed in family medicine. If you did, undergraduate research on sand dabs, we're probably not that as interested in that as if you did, like a community health research project with urban underserved patients.
I was just going to add that, if you do have, let's say, a failure on STEP or in a course, I usually recommend my students include a brief mention of it in their personal statement, acknowledging, what happened, and then also including, what did you learn from the experience? How did you grow from that? And, something that you'll, let's say, take into residency, like time management skills or things like that.
Awesome, thank you. And then a quick clarifier question from the queue. Dr. Brown, you mentioned something that family medicine has 6 months of electives. Is that specific to your university or is that uniform across all family medicine programs?
That's now an ACGME requirement. That's across all family medicine residency programs.
Okay. And I know we're down to the last 3 minutes here. Technically, we have one more question that we wanted to go through, but I want to make sure there's a space for the two of you to say any sort of last composed thoughts. I know, Alice, you spoke first, so let me go ahead and start with Dr. Brown this time. Any kind of last few thoughts, just a minute or two?
Yeah, I hope that students just really enjoy this process. I think it's really exciting to be a future family doctor, and I hope that you will share your enthusiasm and joy for the specialty and for serving your community. And this goes both ways now. It's not only us choosing residents, it's residents choosing our programs. So enjoy the process, share who you are. We're really excited to get to know our incoming applicants.
Niels?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, family medicine is a wonderful specialty with all different paths for different people. In terms of the application process, I think family medicine does really look holistically, is really kind of ahead of the curve in terms of holistic review, and both the applicants and programs are looking for a good fit. So it's a chance to, share who you are and what you're passionate about.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. I know we're at the last minute here, so I want to give a quick thank you to you all for speaking. Dr. Brown, Dr. Mills, not only has it been insightful, it's been inspiring. Hopefully for those who are viewing, this is some helpful information. Again, this is our first time running this webinar series or this type of information, which is specialty specific. I know it's not exactly applicant type specific information. It's more general for those applying for family medicine. We try to keep it broad. But if there's any sort of additional feedback or ways that we can improve these webinars, feel free to share those in the follow-up survey. And again, I know we didn't get to all these questions, but as both Dr. Brown and Dr. Mills shared, there's a lot of resources. There's a national conference that you can attend. There's online resources, program resources that you can access. So thank you so much for joining today, and best of luck to you all for this upcoming application season. And thank you to the speakers for joining.
Thank you very much. Please give us your feedback on today's presentation by filling out the webinar evaluation that will pop up on your screen when the webinar ends. We've recorded this session and we will email you when we post the archive. On behalf of the Association of American Medical Colleges, thank you to our speakers and of course all of today's participants. Have a wonderful day.